Hi, my name is Andrea Montoya, and I am the lead and organizer of the Goss-Grove Pollinator Pathway Project. Thank you very much, Lisa and Parker. I'm honored to be on this panel with you. So they asked me to give this talk to share with you what we've been doing in our community. I did give a little brief presentation last Pollinator Summit, so I decided to call this one Here We Grow Again. Let's build some habitat. So this is a picture of me and one of our newest volunteers to our project. And I think it's been a very exciting experience to figure out how to get these spaces in the ground, how to get people organized and bring it all together. This is more than a biological community effort or a biological and biodiverse effort. This is a community effort. So my question to you and for this presentation today is, can you do this for them? Because the real reason I wanted to speak today is because I'd like to convince you, or at least encourage you, your friends, your family, to think about putting in pollinator habitat and putting some of these plants in your own space to further realize all of the things that Dr. Goulson, Dr. Carpenter, and Lisa and Parker are talking about. So the first thing you may experience deep down in your gut when you hear me talk about can you develop a pollinator habitat is the haves and the have-nots. Our human experience is to think, I can't do this. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough space. I don't have enough knowledge. So let's put that on the back burner. Let's think small. You can have big goals and make small steps because those steps are more important than not making any steps at all. So first of all, figure out what you have. Look in your own space. Look around you. Maybe you want to plant something next to the curb. What underutilized spaces do you have? And by underutilized, I mean, if there's sod growing there, if there's grass growing there, it's underutilized. But we're talking about more and doing more in our neighborhood than developing individual spaces. Our goal was to build, and my passion was to start building pollinator pathways. What is a pollinator pathway? I devoted this slide to RBG, calling it the string of pearls idea. A pollinator pathway ideally does this. It connects little individual spaces that are planted with native pollinator plants to one another within a close proximity, and I'll talk about that in a second and why. Then on each block, you've got these little pockets of pollinator habitat. Then each of these spaces then connect to a nearby block or a nearby park or another little bit further away public space. And then all of this connects to surrounding neighborhoods. There are huge benefits biologically and sociologically to building pollinator pathways. It greatly expands your growing space. So if you're in a bit of habitat or a yard where you say, geez, I just have this little tiny area, but you look at your neighbor's yard or you look at the strip next to the street, you can really start to visualize and imagine something bigger than your own personal space. Maybe you need more sun, maybe you need more shade plants. Maybe you'd love to put in a shrub, but you just don't quite have space for that in your own yard. So building these pollinators and expanding beyond your own acreage or your own territory is really important. It's like when you realize that you can expand outside of your own little yard, it's kind of like seeing a sunrise for me. That's how it felt when I had this realization. Do it in your own yard first, if you must. Stop and visualize your own yard now, and no matter how small or large, what can you plant there? And where can you get the plants to put there if there's nothing there already? Also think about large barrels or pots on a patio or on a balcony. And there's always the vicarious approach. Is there someone near you who you'd love to garden with or for or build a space with? Maybe you already know someone who has a pollinator space or a pollinator habitat. Talk to them about native plants and ask them if they'd like you to give them some. Contribute in any way you can. Native plants make amazing gifts for people. You can uh, buy 3 large pots of the same species. You can buy one really big plant and give it to a friend or relative. So why is our neighborhood suited to a pollinator pathway? You can see that we are centrally located in downtown and centrally located near downtown Boulder. We have on the west end the Boulder Public Library. We have over here to our south the University of Colorado and the big creek that runs through Boulder. And then we have downtown Boulder and the east end over here. These surrounding neighborhoods all have some sort of pollinator parks or natural gardens or native plants. And my goal and my passion was, how can we connect these spaces? So why do we need to connect them? And why build pollinator? And why build these pollinator pathways and biodiverse habitats to begin with? Now, of course, Dr. Gulson really addressed this, as did Lisa, but let me go into it just to repeat it. Biodiverse habitats have more species in them, plain and simple. They have native plants that evolved with the native pollinators and the native insects that are in our area. They just make sense. So biodiverse habitats support pollinators and all insect life. Remembering that pollinators are keystone species. Habitat loss, pesticide use, and introduced diseases are diminishing natural habitats across the globe. This is our opportunity to give back, to contribute, to change, and to be activists. It's very empowering. So why native plants? Well, I just touched on that a little bit. Native plants and native pollinators evolved together. They make sense. They work well together. They come out at the same time. They complement each other. They have the bees have the right body parts to utilize the correct flower that's out at that time. The native plants are fantastic at tolerating the diverse weather of Colorado, the drastic temperature changes, hail, and once they're established, they're pretty low maintenance. And besides that, they're beautiful. So we made all of these realizations. We talked about it. We got really excited and we were pretty stoked to create something. So our community is a little bit biodiverse, if you will. I'm Hispanic, believe it or not. And that's about the most ethnic biodiversity we get in our neighborhood, or ethnic racial diversity. But we have other diversities that really matter. We have retired folks. We have grandparents. We have young and older professionals with and without children. We have a small, probably larger than I know, LGBTQ squared community. And we have tons and tons of students. We are the Goss-Grove neighborhood, and many of us have lived there for 40 plus years. So we got really excited, and here's the timeline of how this unfolded. It was in January of 2018 that I introduced my idea to our neighborhood group about installing these biodiverse islands of plants all over the neighborhood. I was then voted in chair of the neighborhood group, which was kind of funny, but fine. By May 2019, we were breaking ground in public, underutilized spaces called pocket parks by the City Transportation Department. And these pocket parks were technically built as traffic diversion islands. to keep cars from racing through our very busy downtown neighborhood. It's an old neighborhood with wide streets and lots of trees and lots of traffic. But these islands of neglected sod and overgrown junipers were greatly underutilized. Today we have at least 10 pollinator habitats that range from about 10 to 100 square feet. And we also have numerous gardens in each yard. And each of them is around 100 to 300 feet apart, except for the pocket parks. And they're about a block apart from each other. So here's a picture of our latest installment in one of the pocket parks. And you can see that we removed as much sod as we were allowed to. And then these plants are all native plants that we're putting in. Also pictured here on this side of the screen are, on the right side of the screen, is a pollinator garden that was placed last year. So the saying is, among gardeners or native planters, is plant the plants and the bees will come, the bugs will come, the insects will come. And they did, and they do. It's been thrilling. I can't stress enough to you what it feels like to put in this small patch. I'm talking maybe 15 plants at the most in a small area. Give it a little water, give it some sunshine, let it do its thing. And in no time at all, you're witnessing biodiversity at work. It sometimes happens while you're putting the plant in the ground. So you notice I'm kind of vacillating between the word garden and the word habitat. I'm kind of doing that on purpose, and there's a reason for it. Words matter when you're trying to organize folks. I noticed that when I said to people in explaining this project, we wanted to build gardens, they just would gloss over. Their eyes would kind of freeze, and you could see them in their head that this connotation associated with the word garden meant groomed, perfect, borders, raised beds, landscape architects, and it's overwhelming and it's intimidating, particularly when you're talking to folks in a neighborhood where there's a lot of working class people who don't have a lot of time and a lot of money to invest. But if you talk about natural habitats and you explain that it's something like you might see on a hike, they start to get interested. When you explain to them, it can just be a small patch. Maybe it's 10 by 10 feet. They begin to get interested. They begin to feel empowered. I'm going to just interject here the importance of explaining to people, because they might run out and get so excited, run over to Home Depot and just buy a bunch of plants. It's important that you do a little bit of education along with all of this motivation that you give to your neighbors and to yourself. Never use pesticides or chemicals. Grow organic plants. Plant organic seeds. Did you know, many of you do, but some of you may not know, that the seeds that you buy in the store, the plant seeds, are treated with chemicals that repel insects and fungus. So it's important to buy organic heirloom seeds if you can, if you must. Again, I'll repeat, never use pesticides. Don't use herbicides. Don't use fungicides. These things all damage the very pollinators and insects that we are attracting. There's a little saying that I like to use, and that is, remember that Miracle-Gro causes diseases that do not have miracle cures. So what are the community benefits of building these pollinator habitats? Well, it allows people to feel that they are being active during a time when there's a lot of discouragement in our culture, during a time when climate devastation is profound and people feel helpless. And it's hard to know how to go out and organize rallies. It's hard to figure out how to do these really big political changes, but this is so scalable because you can do anything from putting in 100 square foot or 200 square foot native biodiverse habitat all the way down to this little teeny weeny uh, barrel with plants in it. People feel excited about that. And it allows folks to expand socially. And during COVID, it can be done with social distancing and masks. We've done a lot of plantings that way so far this season. And it encourages conversation amongst neighbors. It creates bonding in the joy of creating beauty. Okay. Here's a curbside strip that this neighbor put in. I'm the one in the face shield, and she's the tenant. She's actually renting. So she wanted to put some plants in this health strip right outside of her house. We contacted the landlord. The landlord said, great. He didn't want to buy the plants, but he did pay her money to put these in the ground. And that was an exciting new development this year. These are some neighbors who took this health strip, got an idea that they wanted to expand the pollinator pathways this season, and they put this beautiful little biodiverse habitat. Those are all native plants. Some of it's xeriscaping. They decided to throw in that little tree. That's fine. It's right next to a parking lot and a small apartment. And that defines our neighborhood. We are everything from single family homes to condos to small apartments. So it was exciting to have this new group get involved this year. So I was hoping to really go over some quick steps and how to. I'm just about out of time, so I'm going to do it pretty quickly. Have a big goal, but start small. Think small, because that way you'll take first steps. And first steps are the first actions. Stop and consider, what resources do you already have? These folks are from 2015, before this project started, and they are standing in front of flower beds that were put in our neighborhood in around 2002, flower and vegetable beds. There's 15 of these vegetable beds, and many of these folks still live in our neighborhood, and many of them became active in the pollinator pathway movement when I approached them and asked them for their advice and their experience, because they then began to feel like they were part of this movement. Once again, building community through biological biodiversity, it's a pretty awesome recipe. Learn from locals. Just take a screenshot of this. You'll find some organizations on there that will help lead you in the right direction if you live in Boulder County. And even if you live in Denver, a lot of these things apply. So where do you get the money to do this? We started off with a city grant that I applied for along with one of my neighbors, and with $2,500 and then another infusion of about $1,300 down the road from other resources, we were able to get a lot done, and we still have a little money in the bank, believe it or not. Before you start going out and buying plants and seeds and all of that, stop. Take a deep breath and walk around your neighborhood. What do you have there already? You'll probably find some catmint, some aster, and things that you'll be able to transplant and move into your own biodiverse bed. And find out if, when you see neighbors outside gardening, are they thinning? And if they are thinning and you have some of the plants that and their native plants, put them in your space. So what should you buy with your money that you get your grant from, or from an HOA, or wherever that money comes from? Buy seeds because they're cheaper. You will need to buy some plants because you can't start everything from seed in Colorado. And I would say the biggest bang for your buck that we've seen is buying native shrubs. So chokecherry, serviceberry, rabbitbrush, these are all things that create another level or story for the pollinators to live in. They can come down into the plants, and these shrubs themselves service the pollinators. You're going to have to figure out your time and your person power, and that's been a big struggle. In our neighborhood, since we have such a diverse group of folks, sometimes it's come down to me and another person. Other times there's been 10 or 15 people at a planting and weeding and gardening session, if you will. But it's all right. When you go there and you are alone, talk to your neighbors, talk to the people that go by, that walk by, share your enthusiasm with them. Let them know what you're doing. They'll get interested. And use some of your grant money to buy some garden help if you need to. There will be folks in your neighborhood who can take advantage of that money. Think about where the water's coming from. We didn't have water in the beginning, and so I carried it in buckets, hence the picture. But now we have a spigot. So I feel like a new person. And it was a big shot in the arm when the city put that in for us this year. Think about your soil. Take a screenshot of this if you want. There's lots of resources to help you figure out what kind of soil you have. Don't be afraid of your clay. Clay grows stuff. I have a friend in Centennial who put in some native plants into her clay, and we didn't think they'd really grow, and they've grown. They're beautiful. Here's a little corner of one of our habitats, and I put it here to show you our gardens are messy, they're approachable, and they're full of insects, birds, and human visitors who come just to enjoy the native natural aspect of what we've built. And here's another tiny corner of a plot. And I will say, if you look here, I've got this little black edging here, and though this sounds a little tangential, it's important. These native gardens go dormant and they snow on them, and if they're in public areas, people will trample them. So figure out what you can put in there that's going to be okay with your municipality. I'm going to close with this beautiful basket of gold that blooms in May to remind you that you need to have plants that bloom through all seasons from May until November. You can do it with native plants in Colorado in the clay. It's exciting. And it's even more exciting when not only your garden's blooming, but the park is blooming and your neighbors are blooming. And you see on Facebook that your other friends' gardens are blooming throughout the city. So I encourage you, you are the basket of gold. You are the one that can do this. You are the one who can build these habitats. So the original query for this presentation was, can you do this for them and for you? And the answer is yes, you can do it. Step by step, a few plants at a time. Get in there, get dirty, make it happen. It feels good, it matters, and it's important. So let's get growing. Thank you so much for your time. It's been an honor.
That was wonderful, Andrea. Thank you so much. Your enthusiasm it's an excellent driver. So thank you, thank you. We got a few questions. You were answering them sort of as we were going, but what kind of approval did you need to get from the city to start your project, and how did you go about that?
That's an excellent question. So there's two different types of approval you'll need to get. Find out where you want to plant. If you're going to plant on strips next to the street, that's something you'll need to talk to the city government about, City of Boulder. And we also talk to landlords, because the landlords in City of Boulder are responsible for that strip. In terms of the pocket parks, they were strictly transportation department real estate. And so I met them. I called them. I took a group of our neighbors and we met with them in person and told them what we wanted to do, and they were on board. Don't forget, this is less work for them. When you take over these spaces and you plant them and you beautify them and you build community, it looks good for the city. It looks beautiful for the neighbors, and they don't have to do the work. So it was a positive experience. It's been very easy to team up with the city and the transportation department within the city.
Wonderful. Okay, well, thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead now and do my screen share and share about the HOA in Longmont. And then we'll all join back with all of the presenters in a little bit.
Thank you.